Today we are going on a little educational field trip. We are in search of prickly pear cactuses. Right, boys?
Yes.
We're trying to find some good ones so that we can propagate them to make a living wall along our property. So let's go. All right, so we found a really good spot that has a ton of prickly pear. So you can forage on BLM land, just so you know, a reasonable amount, although that's not defined, of any plant that isn't endangered, which obviously prickly pear is not. So here's kind of the spot we found. As you can see, it's pretty bountiful. So let me show you what you need to be able to forage prickly pear. So when you're foraging for prickly pear, it's pretty simple. You need gloves. Show your gloves. You need gloves and you need tongs. And then you need something to put it in. So we've got some buckets here. And that's about it. You just want to be able to protect yourself from the spines. So let's go take a closer look at these prickly pears and I'll show you sort of the anatomy of them. So this is a prickly pear cactus. It's actually called Opuntia. Oh gosh, I always confuse this. Opuntia, I think, is the actual name of them. So the fruit, you might hear them called prickly pears, but you might also hear them called tunas. So down at the base, and it's kind of hard to see, but down at the base, that's actually what's referred to as the stem. These are the pads, and then we have the spines, which are the spiky part. Around the spines are these tiny spikes, if you can see them. Those are called glochids. And that's more or less the anatomy of a prickly pear. So from what I've read, this is a good time of year to propagate prickly pear cactus because they're in a growth phase. So when you propagate them, they do a good job of turning themselves into cactus. So what you do is you want to take one of these pads and you get the tongs and you start twisting. So you can see we've got some in our bucket here. Then what you need to do is you want to kind of leave them out to dry for about a week because you want the bottom part to scab over. So I'll show you right now, they're kind of juicy. You can see the bottom is still wet because it just came off of the live cactus. So you want that to scab over. And then you can either put it into like a cactus mix, or with these, you can actually just drop them onto the ground with that bottom portion open to air, and it'll scab over and the spikes will turn into roots, which is so cool and crazy. So there's some that have fallen off naturally over here, and I'll show you what I mean. Now we've got our cactus, let's go back home and I'm going to show you how I'm turning this into a living wall and why. So we're back on our land. We've got our buckets of cactus pads and now we're going to start propagating them. So if I wasn't clear earlier, you might be wondering what propagating means. It basically means you're taking a smaller clipping of a plant and then letting it grow into its own plant. So that's what we're doing with these cactuses. Woo, rain's coming. Do you hear that thunder? Okay, so there are different ways that you can do this with prickly pear. Either way, you need to make sure that this part of it, let me get my glove on here, that this part on the end has time to dry off. You don't want to have too much water in your cactuses before that's had time to scab over, or too much water on your cactuses in general, because then they'll get moldy and they won't grow or thrive. And most people probably know that that is the main feature of cactus, is that they don't need a lot of water to thrive. So I talked about this earlier, but to illustrate my point, there are two ways that we could do this. One is to let this scab over and then to put it in a pot with some cactus mix like this, about a third up the pad. The other way is you can do this. Ready? That's it. So these cactuses are amazing for so many reasons, but one of them is that the spines will turn into roots. So if you put them down on the native soil, this is the same soil that they were growing in at the spot where we propagated them from, and you put them on their side, allowing this part that needs to scab over to be open to air, the spines will turn into roots and cactuses will start to grow up out of the pad, which is so cool. So you might be wondering, why are we wanting to make a living wall? First of all, what is a living wall? A living wall is basically a wall made out of plants, to keep it simple. So why do we want to do that? The reason we want to do a living wall, there's really 4 reasons for us. One is it can be protective from trespassers and from predators. A lot of people want to use plants that have some sort of protective element, in this case spikes, because it's a deterrent, you know? So protection is the first reason. The second reason is that prickly pear cactus is so good at conserving water in the soil. So this will help us maintain water in our soil on our land. So when the soil gets soaked, instead of the water then starting to flow over the soil, it'll still be able to soak into the soil because the roots of the cactus will soak it up, as well as the pads. So that's number 2, is to conserve water on our land. Number 3 is for the fruit, because we can pick the fruit every year. We can eat it. We can use it to make jams and jellies. You can make juice out of it. So that's really awesome also. And reason number 4, I'm trying to remember what reason number 4 is. That thunder's getting crazy. Number 4, why we wanted to make a living wall out of prickly pear is it's sort of the beginning of our windbreak. So as time goes on, we'll plant other plants to kind of incorporate into this wall, but it's the beginnings of a windbreak. It's neat for people to start to grow plants along the boundaries of their property, because especially in a place like this where it does get windy, this can help cut down the wind and provide shelter for us and for other animals. I mean, prickly pear, that's probably number 4 on the list for a reason, because since it's not very tall, it's not going to be a huge windbreak, but nonetheless, like I said, it's kind of the beginnings of that. So another reason why it's great to transplant these at this point in time is because it's the monsoon season. So even though it gets like this, cloudy and rainy, most afternoons, evenings, it'll only rain, probably a good rain on our land maybe once a week or so, which is perfectly adequate to get these guys started. So with these, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them down on the ground like this, probably every 10 feet or so, because most prickly pears get up to maybe 5, maybe 6 feet, but they can get up to 10 feet wide. So we want to make sure we give them space. And that's about what I know about transplanting prickly pear cactus at this point in time, but there's always more to learn. If there's other things that you like to use prickly pear cactus for, go ahead and put those in the comments. Hit subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And yeah, we'll see you next week.
But like right here, you can still see some coming out a little bit. So the wall is just a little there. So I made this a little deeper so that won't break through. Because our water level's down there.
We just had the most amazing rainstorm, complete with hail. That's crazy. So I had already put down a bunch of one bucket of the cactus pads. I'm hoping they'll be okay because they say you don't want them to get water right when you transplant them, but I'm hoping since I used the method where they're just on their side that they'll dry off quick and it'll be no harm, no foul. But I've got 2 more buckets, so we'll wait till it dries out to put those. And you just can't be mad because look at all this water.